Okay. How's everybody's week going so far? Nice.
Hell of a challenge. Hell of a challenge.
Yes. Yep. But this is the week that you'll grow the most for sure. It's worth it. You'll have to forgive me. I'm getting over some kind of throat cold or something. So I'm pretty scratchy right now. Okay. React hooks. All the good things from React 16 are coming out. Hooks were released with React 16.8 and haven't really seen anything that has brought so much excitement to, or just in a single release, just in a single new thing as hooks has. In fact, it's been so exciting to the front end industry that Vue is implementing their own kind of hook system. I haven't looked into Angular, but they wouldn't be very smart not to. So yeah, it's going to be it's changing the front end industry for sure. Okay, so the idea behind hooks comes from let me drop this here. I would highly recommend watching this video at some point where Dan and Sophie introduced hooks. It's awesome. Okay, let's see. Web 20, introducing hooks. Okay. All right. So what they talk about in that video is that there's 3 pieces of motivation that came behind building and releasing React hooks. So we'll go through those real quick, and then we'll take a look at a couple of them and work through some examples and stuff. So why is my screen sharing paused? That was weird. There we go. All right, so here's the motivation behind React hooks. First of all, it's hard to reuse stateful logic between components. For example, the higher order components that we've studied is an advanced React pattern that was built to try and solve this problem. It was built to help us reuse what we call stateful logic between components. Same with render props. There are some inherent problems with both of these patterns. For example, they require you to restructure your components when you use them. That gets very cumbersome and makes code hard to follow. And I'm sure all of us in this room would agree that that's the case. If you look at a typical React application in DevTools, you'll find just a ton of components wrapped all around each other: providers, consumers, higher order components, and other abstractions. You can filter those out in DevTools, but this points to a deeper underlying problem, and that is that React needs a better primitive for sharing stateful logic. So hooks allow you to reuse stateful logic without changing your component hierarchy, without doing the crazy higher order component. Let's pass a component into here. It creates a new component, and that's the one we're going to render, all that crazy stuff. React or complex components become really hard to understand and really hard to maintain. They're not very maintainable. So what we mean by that is, imagine a class component that has a component mount and that's doing some data fetching. It's very likely that in that same app, or in that same component even, you're going to do the same data fetching in component update. So for example, let's say we've got a profile page that we're looking at, and we've got a list of users on the side, and we click a user, and the profile page mounts, we need to, when that component mounts, we need to fetch the data for that user that we clicked on. Then we click on a new user. We're not remounting the component, right? But we still need to fetch data for the new user that we clicked on. So we would do that logic in component.update. So now we have related logic that's split into two different components or two different functions. And then along the same lines, that same component mount might also contain unrelated logic that sets up event listeners. And then if we set up an event listener in that component mount, we have to clean it up in component will unmount. So not only do we have two pieces of logic, one set of logic for data fetching, one set of logic to handle an event listener, split up between different functions, but now component mount contains that two pieces of unrelated logic. So it's very hard to understand when your components start to get more and more complex. Hooks let you split one component into smaller functions based on which pieces are related, such as setting up a subscription or fetching data, etc. And then finally, classes just confuse both people and machines, which is true. Hardly anybody really understands how this works in JavaScript. There's problems with when you write JavaScript classes, there's problems with minifying that code. So that it just is a problem when we're using class components. So to solve these problems, hooks let you use more of React's features without classes. Yay. So that's what we're going to look at today. And we're going to start, let's see, that's not the right one. Hold on one second. Let me find the right one to start with. We want to start with this one. Okay. So we're going to start this. This is a component that lets us type in a new title and an input and change the title that is being displayed here. So we have a class component called app. It's got some state with title, input text. It's got a function for handling changes as we type. It's got a change title function that will set our state and update our title with what we've typed in the input. And then, of course, our input that is controlled by state, and then our div and label for the input. Okay, pretty simple. Let's do this. I'm going to send this over to you all. Start a live session. Okay, what we're going to do is create a new file that we're going to call hookapp.js. And let's just close that for now. And let's convert this class component to a function component that uses hooks to, with the state to run this input. So for now, I'm just going to copy and paste everything over into hookapp.js. And then we're going to kind of take this line by line here. So the first thing that we come to in this class is the state object. All right, so we come to our hooks API reference and we notice that there is a state useState hook. So this is the hook that we can use to build component state into function components. So let's go ahead and convert this to a function. We'll call it app. Take away our render. Oh, we don't need to do any of that at the bottom. Let's just export default app. Okay, so now we've got these red squigglies. So let's take these one at a time. So we're going to not use this state object anymore. What we're going to do is import the useState hook from React, and we're going to set up our state using this hook inside this component. And how we do that is by calling useState. You can pass an initial state. We call the useState hook, and it's going to return an array. And this array that it returns has two elements in it. One is the state that we are controlling, or the piece of state that we want to set up, and the other is a setter function that controls that specific piece of state. So we're trying to control this input. So we've got input text. So let's create a variable called input text here. And then the convention is to use the word set in front of whatever your state is called. So we called it input text. Now we're going to call the setter function set input text. And then we get this from useState, and we'll just initialize this as an empty string. Okay, so now we've got our input text state. Oh, but we missed our title state. Let's set that up as well. What's really cool with hooks is you can compose hooks, multiple hooks inside a single component. So we can do something like const title, set title, and let's pass in this is hooks. Yay. There we go. Now we've got two pieces of state inside this function component. So these are pretty much equal right here so far. All right. Let's just try this real quick. We're going to remove that. We're going to render our title in our header. It's no longer called this.state.title. First of all, we're in a function component, so we don't want this. We don't have a state object. Now all we have is one variable called title. Okay, so there's our title that we're going to render that gets initialized with this string here. Let's not worry about on submit yet. Let's take a look at our input. So we've got an ID, a class, or name, on change. We don't have on change yet. Placeholder type value. Okay, value. We do have value in input text. So we'll take away this dot state. And yeah, we should be ready to go. Let's import that into our index. And now let's render at the bottom, let's render hook app instead of our class app. Okay, let's go check it out. Hey, there's our title. This is with hooks. Yay. But we cannot type anything because we don't have that onChanges handler, right? So we had onChange equals this.handle changes in our input. So let's go ahead and add that back on here. And here's our handle changes. But we're in a function, so we need const. We need to take away this. All right, so now let's look at updating our state. So our input text state is controlling this input. When we type, we're going to invoke handle changes, and we want to update our input text state, just like we would update our input text here. However, we don't have this .set state anymore. Now we just have set input text. So we're going to call set input text. We're going to pass in the event target value. So with each keystroke, we're going to take the new value of our input, pass it into set input text, and that should update input text. Yay, it's updating. It's working. Nice. Okay, any questions so far? Feel free to unmute or write in Web 20 channel here. Wave to Josh.
Hey, can you move that Web 20 to the left a little bit? I'm still trying to write down the code. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Just trying to copy it down for later reference.
Sure. And you're going to have all of this, or you have the link to this sandbox as well. Okay, so we've got that working. Let's do this last piece here where we change the title when we invoke this function, when we submit the form. So of course we're going to say const, and on submit, we're going to submit change, invoke change title. That passes in the event. We still want to do event.prevent default, but now we're not going to do this .set state anymore. What are we going to do instead of this?
Just set title, right? With whatever input text is.
Yeah, exactly. Set title with our input text. That's the first part of it. And then we want to clear out set our input text. So we're also going to set input text an empty string. Then we can get rid of that. Yay, we got it. Cool. Let's do one more thing. So this is equal to this class over here. This function component is equal to this class over here. However, with this class, and especially this handle changes, it's pretty easy to implement multiple inputs and control an entire form, right? let's see what it would take to control an entire form with this hook setup. So we'll just call everything to input text to, handle changes to, and okay. So if we wanted to do that, we'd have to create a new input there, set input text to. This is specific to this input text. So we'd have to do something like this. Oh, not change title. Handle changes is the one we'd want to copy down. To set input text to. And it works. My submit isn't working. Change title. But now we're wondering why we went this route when this now seems easier, right? So let's talk about how we can handle and manage multiple inputs inside a form without duplicating a lot of code. So this comes in to play here in this, let's see, introducing hooks. In this first section that we talked about, where we want to reuse stateful logic. So hooks allow you to reuse stateful logic without changing your component hierarchy. We'll discuss this more in building your own hooks. So let's go to building your own hooks and take a look at this. Building your own hooks lets you extract component logic into reusable functions. What that's saying is we can take logic like this, potentially even logic like this, depending on how far we wanted to go with it, and pull that out of this function and into its own reusable function. Let's see. So let's do this. We're going to come down to the bottom here, and we're going to say const. When we build custom hooks, we title them with the use keyword and then whatever we want to title it. So we're going to say const use input, going to be a function. And let's do this. We want this reusable function to control or to control inputs. So everything that's tied into this input, we're going to move into this function down here. So we're going to start with our state. And I'm going to pull our input text, useState, or state values into useInput. Then I need to move handle changes. Well, let's do this. Let's get our input text back into this app here. So we're going to say const input text, set input text. Now instead of calling useState, I'm going to call useInput. However, useInput is not returning an array with these two values. So let's go back to use input. Let's return an array. Input, oh, it's not gonna let me jump down anyways. Input text and set input. Okay, perfect. We're just gonna get, well, we'll keep this here in a second. Okay, so now we've got input text and set input text coming back from use input. So that works. That gets us our controllable input. However, we need to be able to handle changes. We want to move this, abstract this out of our component and into our custom hook. So we're going to take handle changes out of here. And we're going to put that function inside use input. But now we need handle changes inside here. Well, let's just return it with inside this array. Okay, so we've got everything done for our first input. We've got handle changes, we've got input text, but now we don't have anything for our second input. Input text 2, handle changes 2. Remember how we used the state hook twice? What if we could do this? We won't need this function anymore. Now no more red squiggly lines. So let's take a look at what we just did, because that was like, what the heck change? So we pulled out, we abstracted all of the input controlling logic, this stateful logic here. We pulled it all out of our component and we put it into this custom hook that we call use input. And use input is a custom hook that sets up some state and has a handle changes function and then returns all of our state, our setter, and our handle changes function out of it. Now, each time we call use input, it's going to instantiate a new piece of state. So even though this is called the same thing, there's going to be different instances of this state here so that we can say, all right, we've got input text and input text 2 that are controlling our two different inputs. So we can come here and type separately into each input. I don't know why our on submit is broken. We got to fix that. But take a look at this. This is the point I want to get to. Let's say we had input text 2 up here. That's going to be the same. Oh, let's see. Let's take a look at these two components side by side. So here in our class component, just take a look at everything that's inside this component and then down to the JSX. The JSX will be pretty similar, if not exactly equal, right? But now look at the logic that it takes to build out and control a form versus this here. Definitely a lot cleaner over here. Now, beyond this, beyond just this single example, think about if we wanted to build a form in another part of our app, which is very, very common, having multiple forms. You would have to create a class for that new form, for that new component, and you'd have to rewrite all of this logic again. But with our custom component here, we could simply move this to its own file, say export const use input. Now we can import this hook anywhere inside our app. Use it as many times as we want inside components and control all of this logic that's happening here. Never has to be written more than once. We write it one time and we share it through our app over and over and over again. Whereas with classes, you have to rewrite the same logic everywhere you go. Pretty cool stuff. Any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, maybe I'm missing something, but why can't we just put handle changes and change title on the left in their own component, the way you're talking about putting use input in its own component, and just import them?
Yeah, you can, and the best way to do that is,
I mean, if you can, I'm not seeing the advantage to hooks here then, if it's if you can do the same thing already.
so like I said, at the very beginning, if you've worked with React for a while, then you've seen render props and higher order components. So this isn't a problem that we haven't solved. We have solutions for sharing stateful logic between components, but it's through these patterns called higher order components and render props, which have their own inherent problems. So hooks is by far a much cleaner and better way to share stateful logic. It's not that we can't share this kind of stuff in between components. We can. But you have to, in order to do that, you have to use these patterns that require you to restructure your components when you use them. And it's very cumbersome and makes code harder to follow. You look at this is not cumbersome at all, right? This is pretty easy to see what's going on, very easy to follow the logic. Is that the case with higher order components? I mean, we practiced that for a day. Absolutely not. So that's the biggest difference. Again, it's not that you can't reuse stateful logic between components at all. It's just that with hooks, composing stateful logic like this is way easier, way more intuitive, and it will lead you, it will let you build more resilient components, meaning it's easier to come into a component built with hooks that's reusing logic with hooks and maintain it more so than it is with classes that reuse stateful logic with higher order components. Does that make sense?
In the abstract sense, kind of.
It takes some time. I mean, it's really hard. The differences are really hard to show and demonstrate the true power of it in this simple example. When you get hired and you're working on an enterprise style app, an app that's a lot bigger, it makes a lot more sense to start to see the inherent problems with classes. And that's something that you may just have to trust me on in the meantime. Okay, the next part of this, so that's just a small part of hooks. As we talked about before with component lifecycle methods, there's a lot of confusion as well. So let me see. I don't know if that we have. Yeah, let's do it. Might go a little bit past the hour here, but it is recorded if you need to jump off and work on something else in the meantime. Okay. Any other questions before we transition into this other one? Let's see if it'll let us do a live session back to back here. It may not. Oh, you know what? Just kidding. I actually need to forget that one. I need to fork this one first. Well, good. Code Sandbox really doesn't like me doing. What did we do? Oh. All right. Can we go back here? Well, this is good. How about this? Since we're getting some weird network errors, would you all be up for doing one more hook session tomorrow during lunch?
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds good.
three people I have on screen gave me thumbs up. Greg said yes. Dan's got thumbs up.
I'd be excited for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll give me a chance to play with this today and make a bunch of problems to ask you about tomorrow.
Yeah, let's do it. If you've got any issues, then let me know tomorrow at the beginning, and we'll jump into the effect hook, which I think once you kind of know those two, use state and use effect, it becomes a lot easier to learn the rest of them. These kind of encapsulate the patterns that you'll see. So let's do that. Sorry, I don't know what's going on, but we're almost out of time anyway, so that seems like a good solution. Okay,
Dustin, you'll record it tomorrow too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have 10 more minutes if you want to go, if you've got any other questions.
Can you kind of maybe do a high-level rundown of, I guess, the lesson real quick?
Yeah, it'd be a lot easier if I had my sandbox still up.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think let's see. Let's do a rundown tomorrow when we start out, if that works. There is one more thing that I want to share. What is this? Did I save it? No, where would I have saved that? Let's see. there was a really awesome video that was being shared recently where Ryan Florence okay, I'll find it because it answers Greg's question.
You're talking about the one Ryan Florence and another guy did a workshop?
Yes.
I'm not sure if I know exactly where that is, but I'll look for it too.
Okay. Yeah, just post it in Web 20 if you find it.
I might have it. Give me a second here.
Nice.
Oh, I know where it is. You have the, remember the Ryan Florence tweet with the 3 uses?
Welcome.
I will.
There it is.
So Ryan Florence goes through creating or rebuilds the hooks system, basically, which is really cool. So you get an inside or under the hood look of what it is. But the part that is really relevant to what we were talking about is when Michael Jackson comes on stage.
Anything?
It's a good presentation.
Thanks.
I think we can all go home.
Let's see. Here's Michael Jackson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael.
And so at this point, I'll share this on Web 20. So he goes through a much better answer of why hooks are better. So Greg, especially for you, this would be a really great video. But by far the best answer I've seen as to why hooks really are an amazing pattern to follow. So there's that.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. I will see you all tomorrow. Enjoy.
Thanks, Dustin.
Yep. See ya.
Thanks, Dustin.